Hi, welcome to African Perspective. My name is Nelda and I make videos about Africa from Mondays to Fridays. Today we're answering a very simple question. Is Africa a continent or a country? Africa is a continent and it's made up of 54 different countries. So think exactly the same way you look at Europe, the same way you look at Asia, the same way you look at South America or Latin America, North America. Africa is not one country with people that look exactly alike, do the same things. Africa is a continent. It's 30.3 million square kilometers. That is this, it's even more than combining the United States, China, and India. You still don't get the size of Africa. It's a massive, massive, massive continent. Africa has roughly 1.5 billion people, which is again a lot of people. To outsiders, sometimes we look the same, but you cannot compare the different ethnicities in Africa. We speak over 2,000 different languages, and we have so much diversity that I think goes unappreciated. So when you look at the individual African countries, for example, even our fertility rates differ. The way our foods are different. They have different palates. And again, think like when you consider Europe, even if you've tasted French food, you're still not going to be able to know what Italian food tastes like if you've never tasted Italian food before, because the palates are completely different. Like just because you've had a croissant doesn't mean you know what pasta tastes like. It's exactly the same way. You can't compare Tanzanian food to Nigerian food. They're on different parts of the continent. So if you look at a country like Nigeria, for example, they have 230 million people, the most populated country in Africa. If you look at another country like Botswana, for example, a little bit smaller, 3 million people. If you look at a country like Cape Verde, which is an island towards the west coast of Africa, 600,000 people. So Africa is extremely, extremely diverse. But the question is, where exactly did this notion of Africa is a country come from? Where did that notion come from? I think it primarily came from the media. So every time BBC or CNN, all these big media companies are trying to cover the continent, they will typically not speak of Africa in the sense that it's a continent and it has individual countries that have different challenges that they're experiencing. They will cover that news as if one thing is happening in Africa. So, for example, there was a study that was conducted in 2020, and they found that 60% of news titles that cover ongoing news in the continent do not specify the country. So, for example, you hear something like, oh, there's a genocide of Christians in Africa. That is informative, but not as informative as saying there is a genocide going on in Nigeria. You could also hear something like, Africa is the leading continent in cobalt mining. True. However, you need to be specific in the sense that the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, produces 70% of the world's cobalt. So when you look at it like that, then you start appreciating the diversity of the continent. You start understanding that just because you visited one African country doesn't mean you've visited all of them. Doesn't mean that there's nothing new to see. I know a lot of people say, oh, I want to go to Africa, I want to go on a safari. A safari in Tanzania is going to be very different from a safari in South Africa. A country like Tanzania, for example, we have 10,000 lions. That is a rough estimation. Tanzania has the most lions in Africa. The next person on the list has 3,000 lions. You cannot compare that to anybody else. The game reserves in Tanzania are different from the game reserves in South Africa. In the same way, people talk about going to see pyramids, and obviously they're going to go to Egypt. But did you know that there are pyramids in Sudan as well? Over 200 different kinds of pyramids. So Africa is so diverse, and even oftentimes when people speak about Africa, they think of people who look like me, people with my skin color. But the northern side of Africa, for example, is made of people with lighter skin shades, and most of them are Arabs. They're also still African, and I made a video about this a couple months ago, that when we think of Africa, let's not just think of black people, because that undermines the true diversity of the continent. Africa is a geographic term. It covers a geographic area, not a culture area. There is not such a thing as African culture. There isn't. There is such a thing as Malian culture, or Ghanaian culture, or Congolese culture, or Rwandese culture, but there isn't such a thing as African culture. There's some traditions and values that may look similar amongst different tribes across Africa, but they're not all the same. So hope this video answered that question. Hope it's a very, very brief overview to answer this question, because I see people still asking it. There's a survey that was done in I want to say 2018, where less than 20% of Americans could name more than 5 African countries. So if you're ever asked to name an African country, be prepared. And it's not like just for the challenge itself, but a lot of people will be able to name Asian countries. A lot of people will be able to name European countries. So I think Africa deserves that treatment as well, so that you're aware of what is happening in our continent and the issues that we face and the challenges that we face, but also the positive and the beautiful sides of Africa, because there is a very negative stereotype over this continent, and that is why I made this channel. So if this video was informative and if you liked it, please feel free to subscribe, to like, to share, and to comment, and you'll see me in the next video.